we're in this period of massive upheaval, it feels like, socially, economically, politically, and that's showing up in social media too. I know I personally know many people who have decided to drop their own participation on certain social media platforms to make their own political statement. And this is the point of this conversation is, what do businesses do? What should brands be doing? Because the question bleeds from personal opinions to how we run our businesses, and that's a perfectly appropriate question to be asking. I know I personally have a lot of opinions around certain platforms and people, and you can find all of those opinions on my own social media and even on Arlington Strategies channels as well. I'm not shying away from them, but I think the point I want to make here is, how do you as a brand who might have very strong opinions about what's happening in the world, how and when and where do you take your marketing, if you do anything with it? And my answer to that, and a blog post that I wrote about this, social media upheaval in your brand, is meant to address this question in the framework of letting your brand values dictate those decisions. So I'm going to take a little sidebar here. What are brand values? We as individuals all have values, whether we give them time and consideration or not. They're the things that make us think about right or wrong. They're the things that make us think about what we want to be and how we want to show up in this world. So we're big fans of brands and businesses of all sizes going so far as to write down what their brand values are, taking the time to figure out and put a flag in the ground of what matters to them. And this isn't about necessarily being activist at all. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's really creating for yourself a set of criteria from which you are going to make decisions as a business. So at Arlington Strategy, we've developed brand values. We did it as a team building exercise, and it's a great way to actually coalesce your leadership and your everyday employee to help you put words around the culture that might already exist. And where you're building culture in a new business, establishing brand values as the leader is a way of putting those words down and then attracting people who see themselves represented in your values. So back to making those decisions about social media and where to show up. If you are personally offended or are unhappy, whether it's because Elon Musk's Twitter, which is X, which I hate that name, so I call it Twitter and forevermore will, or you don't like that the Meta platforms got rid of fact checkers in the wake of the new administration. Or you think that TikTok is evil because we're giving our data away to China, or maybe there's other social platforms that you've been active on or consider. So do you leave those platforms? Do you stay on those platforms? The first lens to make that decision is, does it offend your values? And for as political as I personally am, and even as activist as I believe that our agency has been and continues to be in using our voice and our platforms for the things we care about, so far the decision that we've made is to stay where we were. Why do we stay where we were? The very simple fact is our audience is there. If our audience were not on these platforms, neither would we be. And so it's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog, but in marketing, the whole point of marketing is to reach your audience. So you ask yourself, if my audience has en masse given up on a certain marketing activity or a certain platform, then that's a good sign that you don't need to be there because your audience is not there. But if you are still reaching people and engaging people on any of these platforms, then you still have an audience and there's still a rationale for you to be there. I think a lot of brands do worry about being perceived as political when they don't mean to be, but I do think there's times that if you decide to make a decision around where you're spending your ad dollars or participating in the social media channel of the day, and you're making that decision because of whether it's a political position or a moral position or a values-based position, I think you should be willing to say it. And I actually think it lends strength to who you are as a brand if you're going to make decisions to stay or leave and you get accused of being political, I think the truth is always the best place to be. If you are making a decision because it's a political statement, then say it. Don't shy away from it. But I am not advising my clients that regardless of where you or your business might be coming down in terms of the political situation or cultural situation happening in our country, as of right now, I don't think that there's this harm that will come to your brand by remaining in the channels that you're already in. And the reality is that this idea of conservative or liberal or libertarian or independent, balanced, that idea in terms of marketing has been around forever. And when you think back to just even newspapers, where before we had all these digital marketing channels, your choice would be to place an ad in a newspaper or a magazine, and those have often been over the years, and they ebb and flow in terms of their editorial positioning. We see change happening even in real time in current news sources, but advertisers sometimes come and go with certain brands, and certain brands come and go with certain advertisers based on a misfit of values. But in general, brands are superseding a little bit about where they're showing up. It's about, again, where is your audience? And if you have an audience in these various places, then your brand, it would behoove your brand to show up where your audience is. But all of this to say, how do going back to that fundamental, how do you make a decision that's in the best interest of your brand when you're upset or you socially want to make a statement? I don't think that making decisions to leave a social platform or join a social platform or advertise in a certain newspaper because you find it offensive, if you decide to forego it because it's offensive to you, then I think that's great, and you can make that part of your brand statement, and you can stand behind that. We see brands that do this all the time, and it's within your right to do it. But the flip side is, for most consumers, and not to say there aren't people out there who do vet brands based on where they're advertising or spending money, and they boycott them because you're spending money on some platform they don't agree with. Most people aren't doing that. Most people are going to vet you where they're showing up on the platforms that they choose to be on, and they're not going to make a purchase decision because you happen to also show up on these other platforms. They're not going to see you there. And if they're there and they're seeing you there, they're there and they don't care that you're there. So I would say worry a little bit less about maybe looking like you're not being political enough, and don't need to worry so much that you are offending your audience by participating in marketing where your audience is. So if that's not confusing enough, things are changing by the day, so this advice might change. So stay tuned, follow us, give us a like, and we'll keep you updated on what we're doing on our social too.